So we were looking at intermediate representation, which is somewhere in between the source code and the machine code or the assembly code. And to generate IR for expressions, which turns out to be a little more interesting than the other constructs, we said that having a syntax tree representation does not allow us to take advantage of sub-expressions, which are common across the complete expression. And if we want to take advantage of that, then we need to have some sort of a DAG. Right? So that DAG, which is shown on the screen, is built from the expression, but then it needs to be built using the SDT that you write along with the expression grammar. And for this, we need to search for a particular sub-expression into this, which essentially means that you have to search for a small subgraph into this DAG. However, subgraph isomorphism is hard, and therefore we were a little concerned. But it turns out that this is a very simple expression, constant number of terms, plus it's a small tree which you can search very easily in a graph. And therefore, in this specific case, this hardness does not affect us. There is one possible way in which the nodes get numbered when you're talking with talking about expressions, and that numbering is called as value numbering. So each node is assigned a value, and there are certain properties which get satisfied with this kind of numbering. So let's look at that. So whenever you encounter the first leaf, which is this A, you assign it a new leaf, and at that time you give it a new number, let's say 1. Then you go around and then look for the other, the next expression that is going to come up, quite similar to a postfix notation. Right? So therefore we are going to encounter B as the next one. Right? So because that plus cannot be over without evaluating this expression, and this expression requires A, right? And that is already present, so you still give it the number A, right? So you don't duplicate any of the operand nodes, in the sense that any of the variable nodes. Right? The operator nodes might get replicated or duplicated in this. For example, this star and even these pluses, these are replicated. The reason being that these could be different, their operands could be different essentially. If the operands are the same, then you can reuse those. So that B becomes 2, then C becomes 3, and so on. And after this, in a postfix kind of traversal form, minus gets the value 4, and that shows you that this particular expression B minus C gets a value number of 4, right? So the expression gets a number, right? Which is of course associated with the root of that subtree, and therefore using that number you will be able to talk about that sub-expression. From here you move to B minus C, then you come to A star, right? So therefore you need to talk about star, so that gets the value 5. After that again B minus C comes. At this stage you get the B, which is 2, then you get C, which is 3, and then you look for if there exists a minus containing this 2 and 3, and indeed it exists, and therefore you return that, and that turns out to be 4 again, right? So this B minus C is 4 again, and then D, which becomes we missed the plus, okay, so we missed this plus, so that becomes 6, and then after that D becomes 7, and then star becomes 8, and plus becomes 9. So this kind of numbering is we have seen in the postfix form, and that is what gets followed. But there are certain interesting properties which this conveys. Right? So one thing is that it uniquely identifies a node in the DAG. Right? So as you can see, there is some sort of hashing which you can use to track these subgraphs. It's also not necessary that you need to have an explicit expression tree, although some sort of structure is definitely required. So in the case of hashing, for example, you can have the node associated with it. Within that, you keep track of, okay, these are the children of this particular node. So in some sense it is still explicit, but you might keep track of that using let's say a hash value rather than the actual link that is available. The property that one maintains here, or it gets maintained here because of the postfix order, is that if a node has a value v, then all the children which are transitive children, which means all the descendants, all those have the value number of less than, strictly less than v, right? And since it is unique, it becomes strictly less than. And that indicates that there is some ordering which is possible in this DAG, and that ordering is essentially the order of how the expression should be evaluated. And if you want to insert L of R, for example, B minus C, then you need to search for that op with children L and R, and that can be done in small amount of time, right? So you hash that op and then look for its children, right? So any questions on this one? All right, so please build the expression tree for or expression DAG for a plus b plus a plus b. Okay, the question here is how will we handle the increment and decrement operators? Typically, the increment and decrement operators will have to be either removed from this syntactic sugar that is given at the source code. So at the IR level, you will most probably convert it x plus plus will be converted to x equal to x plus 1, right? And at appropriate places, you will have to convert it such that it happens before or after that particular expression. So as we discussed yesterday, this expression is, or this kind of representation is useful when it does not have a side effect. So you will have to move the side effect to a different expression, right? A different statement altogether at the IR level. Okay, so the question, Sarthak's question here is that if you have C minus B versus B minus C, can we still do something? So it can get done. In fact, it does get done at the IR level. For example, in this case, you can have B minus C as the common, and then that into D itself is also common, and then minus of that as a unary minus you can apply. Yeah, so it can be done, although that is not something which we are doing. So when we come to optimizations, some simple algebraic expressions like this could be incorporated into the optimization pass, which will look for such patterns. And so it cannot be done in general, but for some simple patterns this can be done. So in this case also it is possible to be done, but you have to look for that particular pattern in the expression. For example, it turns out that because of, let's say, some hash defines or some constants used, you might have in this case, for example, B minus C, right? And it turns out that let's say D turns out to be 0, right? Because of whatever the compiler is trying to push the constants, and accordingly it's able to figure out that D could be 0 or D is 0. In that case, even if that B minus C, C minus B are different expressions, you know that that is going to be 0. And that is an algebraic property which you can utilize. At this stage, while you are generating the IR, at that time you will not know about this part. After you have generated the IR, typically that optimization gets done after that IR is present, the first level IR is present. Then we apply optimizations, then we get again the optimized IR. On that we apply the code generation. So at that time it's possible to be done. Yeah, but it needs to be explicitly incorporated. Directly in this case, even otherwise, for example, if this would have been B plus C and C plus B, right? So in this case, at least you need to have that minus which is separate. But even B plus C versus C plus B, it's an algebraic property which at the IR generation level you might not know. Or, I mean, not that you might not know, it's just that we don't push that as part of IR generation. Right? After IR is generated, then we apply the optimization. Because you are already doing a lot of jugglery with respect to what are the labels generated, what are the go-tos that you need to have, etc. What are the symbol table entries corresponding to these variables, etc. So it's better to keep optimization paths separate because it's optional. So that's also another thing, that depending upon what the user provides as O0, O1, O2, O3, you might want to apply a certain optimization and not apply a certain. Okay, so how many nodes are there in this A plus B plus A plus B? Seven, 5, okay. Then do it 4 or 5, okay. Any other answers? Okay, 5, 4. Interesting. Maybe somebody can explain, or I don't know, you could just draw and share your screen or something like that. Maybe we'll start with 4. Let's say somebody can explain why you get 4 nodes in this. So we do have 3 nodes, one for A, one for B, another for plus. So what is the 4th node? Let's call this as A1 plus B1, or A1 plus 1 B1 plus 2 A2 plus 3 B2, right? So that is the expression we have, and we definitely require one node for A1, one node for plus 1, and one node for B1, right? That is the 4th node. From plus 2 edges to A plus B, okay. Then you just require 3, right? Why do you require 4th one? Okay, so as far as Shivram's suggestion goes, you just then require 3 nodes, right? You don't require a 4th one. Venkata Surya says A plus B plus points to plus in the previous A plus B. Okay, but I think there is, yeah, so that first plus, I mean plus 1 I understand, that will have those 2 operands, and what will be the operands for the second plus? 1 is the plus 1, right? What is the second operand? A plus operator pointing to plus, which has A and B as children. Okay, we can't have self loop. That's why 4 nodes. Okay, sounds fine. Okay, so let's. Okay, some people are saying 5. What is the reason behind 5? If we maintain left associativity, tree generated will be different. Use A and B again instead of A plus B. If we consider associativity, then we get 5. If it had been minus, we would have needed 5. Yeah. So as we were discussing, some of you might have optimized that A plus B again, right? So that should not be done at this stage, right? You have to maintain associativity here. You cannot do optimizations at this stage, and therefore you require that fifth node, where adding of A2, right? In this case, adding of A2 must be done before you add B2, right? So A1 plus B1 happens first. On that you have to add A2, and on that you have to add B2. So therefore, so the expression that you would possibly, the tree that you got would work for something like this. So for this kind of expression which I have posted in the chat box, that 4-node tree is okay, right? Because you are maintaining the order of evaluation, but the order of evaluation cannot be changed because of this optimization at this level. Right? It needs to be done later, as some of you are mentioning that if you would have, let's say, some other operator, then it would have been a trouble. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions further? All right, so let's move ahead. So let's come back to our 3 address code, which turns out to be the most common 3 address code which people use. And let's see how we represent, as I was mentioning that why we need to worry about it in a tabular form, we have to store and so on. So let's look at that a little carefully. Okay. So an address can be a name, constant, temporary, etc. And there are different kinds of statements which we need to worry about. Types definitely, but the type declarations usually go into directly the symbol table, so we don't have to really generate as such the 3 address code corresponding to that, except when the variable is not primitive type. So sometimes you might have to, for example, if it's a structure or an array, you might have to say that the stack pointer kind of changes by some value which is equal to let's say the structure of the structure size or the array size, etc. Maybe you have to align at a particular boundary and so on. Right, so that may have to be done. Although stack is not something which is currently visible at the IR level, but you have to make a provision for it, either directly in the symbol table or sometimes in the IR. If you push it into the symbol table, typically you won't be able to perform optimizations on the IR with respect to that particular space which you have allocated. But if you push it as part of the IR, then there might be some optimizations you can do. For example, you might have later when you generate instructions, you might generate instruction to push the stack pointer by some value. Then another declaration comes, so you push it again and so on. So there might be multiple instructions of updating the stack pointer, which you can optimize on by having a single change of offset, right? So which is like allocation of multiple variables at the same time. Then the next part is the assignments, which is quite common, but typically there are 2 forms that we will be considering at the IR level. Right? One is the binary operator, another is the unary operator, where the unary operator is also not always present, right? So you can have x equal to y, or you can have a separate copy statement which is like x equal to y. Right? Many times these 2 can get grouped together. The reason why these are a little separate is because you are generating these assignment statements from the expression that you have, like we discussed on the previous slide. Then there are unconditional jumps like go to. Then there are conditional jumps like if x relational operator y, then go to a particular label. Then there are parameters which get passed to functions, and then there are function calls themselves. Return value equal to call of some function p. And then there are other things like indexed copy, which is based on array or structure or union offset corresponding to a base address. For example, x equal to yi or xi equal to y. Right? So these are typical statements which might exist. Another example is this pointer assignment. Depending upon what your higher level language is, but since we are following C, we'll use that syntax. So in some languages where the pointer dereferencing is not allowed or address taking is not allowed, then you don't need to worry about that part. So these are typical statements or set of statements that you require to be taken care of while generating 3-address code for. And this kind of covers almost all the different kinds of statements that we have. Anybody sees any other statements that we have missed out? Okay, so most often the other statements that might come to your mind are typically syntactic sugars, and which can be lowered into this 3-address code form. Multiple of these 3-address code forms to take care. For example, you can think about maybe variable number of arguments or something like that, right? So which can be taken care of by having some additional arguments or by having additional attributes to these parameters and so on. Okay, so let's do that for different kinds of statements. So let's say that I have an assignment statement like this. It is a slightly different form, but has similarity to what we had earlier. So let's say there is some assignment statement. The IR corresponding to this in 3-address code is going to look something like this, where I perform minus of C, then I perform B into whatever was the temporary that was generated, then again minus of C, this is without any optimizations, then B into T3, and then T2 plus T4 I combine and then assign it to A. Right? So that seems to be a reasonable 3-address code corresponding to this. The way it gets stored need not be in this string form. It gets stored in the form of quadruples, and the way it looks like is in a tabular form, where there is let's say an operator and then the 3 arguments, right? And because there are 3 arguments, therefore this is called as a 3-address code, and because there are 4 items that you are storing, therefore these are called as quadruples. Sometimes you might be able to do away with some of these. For example, okay, so I should mention that compilers used to be very CPU intensive and memory intensive procedure. When you run, for example, GCC, you should check the top command and you will see that it's actually consuming 100% of your CPU, and it's also taking a lot of memory. Therefore, and traditionally it has been, now the memories are quite well, plus the CPUs are quite powerful. But in the initial days, we also wanted to reduce the amount of memory that you take for this. And therefore, it can get converted from quadruples to triples. So there was another representation which was suggested that whatever you are doing with respect to this T1, right, which are essentially temporaries, you might be able to say that the second instruction here, the second instruction is referring to the result of the first one. If we do that, then I can use offset within this table, within this quadruples, as an argument in the second instruction rather than using the quadruples, right? So let me show you how we will do that. So what we do is that I am still having the operator, and then minus of C I am going to not store in a temporary, but it will be represented as, let's say, entry or row number 0 in this particular table. On that I am going to apply star and B on that T1, which is coming as the second argument, and that gets stored as entry number 1 or row number 1, and so on. So again, minus of C is entry number 2, and then star B2, that is B into C, happens here, or B into minus C happens here. And then I keep using those offsets or those row numbers or entry numbers into my calculations. Right? So my number of parameters or number of columns which I maintain is going to change from 4 to 3, and therefore I can store these as triples. Okay, so if I have quadruples representation or the triples representation, can somebody tell me what are the advantages and disadvantages of this scheme? Okay, so as soon as you are inserting this row number 0 is getting referenced in row number 1, etc., that means that you are dependent on these positions. That means now the relative positions are going to be important for you. That is like saying that you are converting an, let's say, I think this will be a little crude example, but you have a random access array and that you are converting into a linked list, and therefore now whatever you want to go to, that is going to be relative with respect to what position you are in. So Sarthak is saying optimization is in triples as we are assigning numbers. I see. So why do you say that? I didn't understand it quite properly. So the one way to understand what Sarthak is saying could be that since you are directly referring to the instruction and not about a variable you need to look for, let's say in a symbol table and so on, you might be able to associate instructions easily. Right? So that could be one interpretation of what Sarthak is saying. So that seems to be one advantage of using triples. The advantage of using quadruples is that the dependence across different instructions. Relative positioning matter anyways because the order signifies operator precedence and associativity. The operator precedence and associativity is already encoded whether you are using quadruples or triples. That has to be anyway respected. We can access sub-expressions and see repetitions. Okay, this I am not sure. For example, in this particular example, we had both the sub-expressions as B star minus C. Right? But the expression that we finally got contained multiplication of 1 and multiplication of 3, which is similar to having two different temporaries like T2 and T4. into the expression. So it might be difficult to look for expression. So the amount of work that you will have to do in quadruples and triples to identify these patterns is likely to be similar. Shrisha is saying, doesn't the relative positioning matter anyways, because the order signifies operator precedence? Yeah, so this we discussed that operator precedence is going to be encoded as well as associativity in both quadruples and triples. Okay, so one advantage of quadruples is that if you want to reorder instructions for some reason, right, that is easier to do in a quadruples representation compared to a triples representation. The reason being that the statements are kind of independent, whereas here, as soon as you reorder, their relative positions change, and that can affect the rest of the numbering. So if I change 0, that is going to affect 1, 2, 3, etc. So that is going to be one important reason why quadruples might fare better. But why would you want to reorder instructions? So why does a compiler reorder instructions? Okay, so Anishwar says some sequence of instructions may use fewer registers, reduce register pressure. Okay, that's a good suggestion. For example, if I load some particular variable, let's say A, into a register R1, and then for a long time I don't use it, and then use it later. So for this long time, that register is still blocked. Instead, if I move this instruction just before its use, the use of variable A, then I have that register free for a long time, then I load it, so now it becomes filled or used, and then I immediately use it, right? So that is the reason, that's also one of the reasons why we would like to have definitions as close to their usage in programming languages as possible, which was not possible in ANSI C. But for example, in C++ that is allowed, or in GCC that is allowed. So that is definitely one reason. What could be other reasons why we would want to reorder instructions? Anything from your foundations of CSD class? Okay, so there are dependencies across instructions, and those dependencies you don't want for a larger time. This is similar to the previous reason, but it need not always be using registers. Sometimes you might be using scratchpad, right? So you have this Tomasulo's algorithm, where you might be able to forward certain operands from one stage of the pipeline to the another, right? So this can be very useful when you have the instructions nearby. Another reason could be that you have some sort of vectorization which the inbuilt hardware supports. For example, on Intel machines, the vector width could be 4 or 8 instructions. What vectorization means that you have the same instruction, but that is operating on different data items. So for example, A of I equal to 0, where A of I could be 0, 1, 2, 3. So A of 0 equal to 0, A of 1 equal to 0, A of 2 equal to 0, and A of 3 equal to 0. So these 4 instructions can be combined into one instruction, because this is A of something equal to 0, right? And that something is the data which is changing, I equal to 0, 1, 2, 3. So that becomes a single vector instruction rather than 4 scalar instructions. So that can be fast executed. And vectorization turns out to be a very important optimization principle in the Intel architectures. So that could be another reason, because by moving instructions here and there, you might be able to, as long as you satisfy the semantics of the program, you might still be able to have more opportunities for vectorization. There could be others. For example, sometimes reordering the instructions might affect how you are accessing the cache. Right? So your locality might improve when you move the instructions around. Sometimes the execution time of the program might change when you reorder instructions. Some of the instructions which are costly, these can get guarded by some of the lighter instructions, or some of the instructions which might consume fewer cycles, fewer amount of power. Right? So in such cases, reordering will help you reduce the overall cost of execution in terms of both performance as well as the energy. Okay, so there are multiple reasons why you would want to reorder, but reordering requires you to maintain or satisfy the dependencies. That is, if you are writing something and reading that value, that dependence needs to be maintained. Okay, so that turns out to be a small issue. So the instructions can be reordered, but it becomes difficult to reorder, right? So people have suggested different ways in which you can still allow reordering, and as that proverb goes that in computer science everything can be solved with another level of indirection. This can also be solved with another level of indirection, where you have a separate array which is an indirection array, and that points to what triple it is pointing at. Right? So maybe 0 is pointing at 2, 1 is pointing at 3, and so on. Or I can reorder these in this manner. Sorry, this is not the mapping. 0 just means that this is pointing to 0, and 1 means that is pointing to here. So this particular table, the triples table, can remain as it is. I can just reorder this particular indirect triples and keep the pointers to appropriate entries, and that will allow me to reorder the triples in this form. However, one might say that, well, all of this jugglery we did because we wanted to get rid of the quadruples, but then essentially with these indirect triples, what you have is a quadruples form, so why not use it? So yeah, it's our choice. We could use either quadruples or triples. If indirection triples are required, then essentially the memory requirement turns out to be the similar. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's come to what Anishwar and Arnav were suggesting about the register allocation. Right? So let's allocate registers to variables. Right? So that is something which does not get done at this stage, right? At the IR stage. It gets done a little later because you don't know how many registers are there in the hardware, because this is hardware dependent. Right? But we'll still do it at this stage because there is something which will get revealed because of this exercise. Right? So let's assume that we are generating final code, right? And your set of expressions or set of statements are going to be like this. Right? So how many registers you can allocate for this set of expression? So what do you mean by allocating registers to variables? Is essentially you don't have direct access to these memory locations A, B, P, Q. All of these are memory locations. So when we are referring to them, typically we don't refer to them directly. What we do is we load those values into a register which is closer to the CPU. We access those registers in the instructions. Let's say you are doing add, multiply, other number crunching operations, and then when you want to store it into a variable, then you use a store instruction. So there is load and then there is store, and for storing these values or the storing these values of the variables, we require registers. Now, depending upon how many operands are expected in an instruction, you might require at least those many registers. For example, if this is A plus B, I definitely require two registers for storage of A and B. Right? But as far as P is concerned, maybe I can make you reuse some of the registers. Right? So that's what you have to think about and allocate registers. So how many registers do we require for this set of this sequence of expressions? 4, 3, okay, 3, AT1, BT2, CT1, DT1, ET1, PT3, QT4. Okay, I'll wait for a few more seconds for others to try out. This exercise is important and it will reveal to you some things of register allocation, which has been, by the way, an important topic in compilers. Reason being that register allocation, like most other problems in computer science, is also a hard problem. And it has very nice connections with graph theory. So register allocation can be mapped as a graph coloring problem, vertex coloring problem. Okay, 3. Okay, so let's try that. So I'm going to try with a naive method, and then you have to tell me how to allocate in 3 or 4 registers. So what I'll do is, I'm going to say that, well, I'll put A in R1, B in R2, then P in R3, C in R4, and so on. And total I require 7 registers. I am happy with that because I don't have to do any jugglery of any exponential time algorithm like vertex coloring for solving this problem. And I might require, although, more hardware, right? So I require more number of registers. Why should you reduce the number of registers? And why are you worrying about this 4 and 3 and so on? Why not 7? The ISA gives certain number of registers. Yes. So the instruction set architecture that Anishwar is talking about, that provides you only a fixed number of registers, and not all the registers are also for all the purposes. Sometimes there are special purpose registers and so on. So we typically will have very few on a CPU. Typically we will have probably a few scratch pad registers. And we can do parallel computations if we have more registers left. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so so we have essentially limited number of registers, so we cannot really use these as such. So we have to reduce the number of registers. But yeah, that makes sense, Sarthak. We are talking about ILPS. So however, so let's say that there is some instruction which does require not one instruction, but let's say that because of some reason I come up with a program which can require me, let's say, 10 registers, right? So I have come up with some program such that there is a requirement of 10 registers, but the hardware supports only 5. Right? What will happen in such a case? Can the program still run on that machine? So the question is that my program requires 10 registers. Right? Even if you do this optimized processing of, let's say, register allocation in an optimal manner. And okay, so there are solutions here that you can spill to the global memory. So having fewer registers is not binding that your program has a requirement that it has to be written in a particular manner and so on. If your program requires more number of registers, some registers will get spilled to memory. But then what that means is that your access time to register, which is probably a few cycles, is going to get converted into few hundreds of cycles, like accessing the main memory. And that is going to be not pushed to disk. It will, no, it will go to just main memory. It will not go to disk. Of course, if there is paging and all, then it will fall back to disk, but we should say that it gets spilled to memory, not to disk. Yeah, so that access latency, that kind of increases considerably. So we would like to reduce the number of registers that get used in the program, and therefore we would like to say that, okay, 7 is not acceptable, so let's see if we can do something about it. Right? So let's perform some observations on this one. So first thing is that if you define a variable, right, for example, P in the third instruction, that kills the previous definition, right? So this term is a term from compiler itself. So killing essentially means that the previous definition is no longer available, right? And we are talking about a sequential program. That means that the previous value is no longer required, right? So if there was a register which was assigned to this P, the first P, I can reuse that register. Okay? So that is first observation. A variable's use refers to its most recent definition. So if I am using this P here, this P refers to the P's definition in the previous instruction and not the one here. This seems natural, but it turns out that it's not as easy as it sounds, and as you get into some sort of memory modules associated in the context of parallel processing, this will become more complicated. But for now, in the sequential setting, it suffices to say that the use refers to the most recent definition. So I need to just have a lexicographic comparison backwards from a use, and whatever is the first definition that I encounter, that is going to be the most recent definition. But that need not always be easy, because you might have an if-else construct, then there might be an use. Now which definition that it might refer to, because the definitions might be there in the if and else branches. More complicated, you might have a loop, and there might be multiple nestings of this if-else loops, etc. So which definition or definitions that a particular use might refer to. This is difficult to predict at the compile time. In fact, it is impossible to be predicted at compile time. In general, you will say that these are the set of definitions which might be referred to by this particular use. Right? So use refers to a read, and definition refers to a write. And we say that a variable holds a register until it is live. Right? What do we mean by a variable is live? We say that like we talked about killing, so let's talk about being live also. So we say that a variable is live if it has a future use, right? So what this means is that as soon as this use of P is over, as soon as the use of P is over, this particular P is dead, right? It is no longer live. Whereas this particular P is going to be live here also as well as here also. Right? So we say that a variable is live if it has a future use. And once we have these observations, then we will be able to optimize this processing in a formal manner to come up with a better register allocation. Right? So what I am going to do is that since each definition is going to give rise to a new, is going to kill the previous definition, I am going to now give numbering to that. So for example, I am saying that this is P1 and this is P2. And then this is P3. Similarly, there is Q1 and Q2 and so on. And their corresponding uses, I have also named them accordingly. Right? For example, this is a reference to P2 rather than P1 and so on. And I also color coded them so that it becomes easier for us to understand. Right. Once I have this, then I might be able to perform register allocation in a slightly better manner. Okay, I think I will explain that a little maybe in the next class because I will require some time to explain this. But any quick questions? Okay, in the afternoon we have the lab. So we don't have any specific agenda. If there are people who want to ask questions about the assignment, then we can meet. I mean, I'll ask the TAs to come over. So anybody wants to have the lab, then we can have the lab. Otherwise, I will not trouble the TAs. Okay. So if there are nobody wanting to have any questions during that time, then we'll. Okay. So then we'll have the lab. I'll ask the TAs to be present. These questions are about the assignment, I suppose. Not about the, yeah. Okay. So then we'll ask the TAs to be present. All right. So we'll stop here. See you.